The characters of The Walking Dead have taught us many things. Growth. Sacrifice.
I found
Anger. Regret.
back to it.
And what comes after? But which characters stand out the most? Let's count down the top 10 The Walking Dead characters. Now remember, this is my personal top 10. So at the very end of this video, once you've seen my number 1 character, I want you to comment your list. Now remember, this isn't my favourite characters, these are just the best. But still, of course, I would have to like these characters before doing it. So as much as it is based on the quality of the character, I still really like all these characters that I mention. And of course, we are going to be looking at both The Walking Dead universes. The Walking Dead TV show and its spin-offs being in the same universe. That's one universe. And then of course we've got the comic universe, and the video game by Telltale is in that universe. We know this because of course we see the comic book characters, how they look in the comics in the game. For example, we see Herschel at the barn before the comics are set there. We then see Glenn at the pharmacy. He leaves the original video game group and then goes to live on throughout the comics. And then in A New Frontier, we see Jesus. Then in the final season, we see a character called James, a former Whisperer who has left the Whisperer War storyline to be by himself. James wasn't actually in the comic, but he is proven to be in this universe. So remember, no characters are off limits. At the end of this video, when you comment your list, remember to bear in mind all the characters you've met throughout the years, all the characters you've encountered as Clementine, all the people you've encountered whilst following Rick. So let's get into my top 10 The Walking Dead characters. Number 10. Comic Michonne. If there's one thing that I can say the comics did better than the TV show, it's Michonne. In the comics, Michonne's brutal persona works. Michonne in the comics is for me the most memorable character from the comics. She has a true story of revenge. The governor did horrific, awful stuff to Michonne, and in the end, Michonne completely mutilates him for it. I think Michonne's best moment is when she's tied up by the governor and she says her famous "I'm not crying for me" speech. In this one scene, we see what Michonne's character is all about. Something that the TV show's Michonne fails to kind of implement into her warrior personality. In the show, we see Michonne mutilate the governor by cutting his eye out with glass. But what did the governor do that was so bad that made Michonne have such a rage? In the comics, Michonne's character is simply a warrior. She's a lone wolf. But in season 4 and 5, she kind of just loses that. It doesn't feel like character development. It just feels like she's lost the point of the character. In the comics, however, Michonne goes on to be with Ezekiel, much like we see Carol in the show. However, I think it works so much better in the comic because Michonne is with Ezekiel because of how alike they are. What makes a character good in The Walking Dead is a balanced story, a whole story arc that fits the character and develops them in a way that would fit the story and fit the character. And I think Michonne in the comics is a perfect example of that. Everything the character does is in character for the story we have been told. In the TV show, however, I really dislike what they're doing with Michonne. The Michonne we see in the comics does things in character. Everything she does is what you'd expect from Michonne. And out of all characters that remain good whilst also being memorable is comic Michonne, which is why Michonne is number 10. Number 9. Lewis. Lewis first made his appearance on The Walking Dead the final season, and from episode 1 to 4, he was an amazing character. However, until you find out his backstory, his actual ambitions, you really will underappreciate the character. Lewis was quite a humorous, comedic character, but underneath it all, he wanted to be a musician. He was a musician. And everything about the character, what can happen to him, what does happen to him, it's quite poetic. In the end parts of episode 2, you can choose to save Lewis or to save Violet. And by making the horrible choice to save Violet, in episode 3 you will find Lewis with his tongue cut out. Which of course is poetic because Lewis is a musician. Without a tongue you cannot talk, let alone sing. So once Lewis's tongue is cut out, the only way he can communicate now is with music. There's so much depth to this eccentric, likeable character, which is why Lewis is number 9. Number 8. Abraham. The story of Abraham is another story that is really underappreciated. Abraham lost his whole family and didn't stay in madness like Morales. He came back, he helped people, and in the end he sacrificed himself. The beginning of the end for Abraham and Glenn in season 6 episode 16, the cliffhanger episode, there's something you might have missed. As Negan walks around introducing himself, taunting the characters, choosing who he's going to beat down to show an example of, Abraham stands out. Abraham was ready to sacrifice himself for the group. Although Glenn died shortly after, as far as Abraham knew, he had sacrificed himself. This is a character who had everything. He was funny. He had come from a dark place. However, remained a humorous character, and it worked. Especially in The Walking Dead, nothing is better than a character who has been in a really bad place and then transforming into an actual funny character. Even in Abraham's darkest times, he's still humorous because it's who he is. He's staying true to the character. Even moments before he died, he was being funny. And I think because Abraham was so strong even when he was dying, I think it did show a lot of the characters not to be too scared. Abraham's character represents being strong, bravery, and coming out of dark times. As underappreciated Abraham's story is, he will still remain to be one of the greatest characters the Walking Dead universe has ever seen. Number 7. Carol. Now, I've never been a massive fan of Carol. I used to be quite annoyed at all the hype around Carol and characters like Daryl. Characters that won't be killed because people love them too much. And in season 6, when Carol had her feud with Morgan, that's when I really started to get sick of the character. It seemed that her character was just going in one continuous loop. She wants to kill people, then she doesn't. But on paper, when you look at her whole story, look at the character development that she's had, it's some of the best development in any show I've ever seen. In season 1, she was an afraid, beaten wife. In season 2, she gets a little stronger, however loses Sophia, and from there, goes off track. In season 3, having only just found the prison, when infiltrating the corridors of the prison, T-Dog makes the ultimate sacrifice and saves Carol. This is a sacrifice that Carol to this day doesn't talk about that much, but it's still with her. In season 4, she thinks she's helping by burning some infected, ill people's bodies. These people were just sick, but Carol decided to burn them, thinking she was helping the group. Carol confesses to this and is exiled, and she comes back a warrior. Carol was with 2 young girls, which of course reminded her of Sophia, developing her character even more when she has to kill one of them. She gets to a certain point when she goes to Alexandria. Having become so familiar with the idea of killing people, she starts going backwards. This time almost exiling herself from Alexandria and going her own way. She spends many months away from the main group, trying to figure out an actual way of life. Fast forward to the beginning of season 9, and she's finally living a good life. She's with King Ezekiel and treats a boy she met at the kingdom, Henry, as her son. Fast forward to the end of season 9, and she has lost Henry and made the choice herself to lose Ezekiel. Now she's back to the beginning. Apart from this time, she's a strong character. She's not like she was in season 2 or 3, she's grown. This is how she's strong enough to make the choice to leave Ezekiel. And throughout the show anyway, she was was doing stuff that was in her character. She's never done anything out of character without the character development explaining that. So Carol 100% has the best character development in most of the Walking Dead universe, and is one of the best characters. I do actually prefer Father Gabriel, but how Father Gabriel is being perceived in season 9 has completely ruined his character, so Carol took number 7. Number 6. Morgan. Morgan's story is probably one of the greatest in both the Walking Dead universes. It's troubled and tedious, but really good. Morgan is the first true introduction we get of the Walking Dead. He's the first to meet the main character Rick Grimes. He tells him what the Walking Dead are. Out of all the villains we've seen in The Walking Dead, the biggest villain to Morgan is himself. With characters like Abraham, he was in a dark place and Eugene found him and gave Abraham something to fight for, something to live for. But Morgan lost his wife and son and had no one, he had nothing. So over the seasons he's in a constant conflict with himself. And like Morgan said in season 3 when he appeared for the second time, he truly believes the weak people live. And as we saw in season 7, the people he's known die and he remains. And Morgan is one of the best characters because he is alive. In season 8 it did get a bit tedious with him snapping in and out of being sane. But like we saw for the trailer for season 5 of Fear, he's using his experience, his character's backstory to help others, and that makes him a truly good character. Number 5. Daryl. If you paid attention whilst watching Daryl throughout the seasons in The Walking Dead, then you would know he's not just a mumbly biker. He's got a true sad backstory, and although stuff has happened to him in the past, he still turned out decently. He's got amazing character development. If you look back at him in season 1, he was a bit immature and snappy, but if you look at him now, he's literally taking Rick's role from the comics, and he's a leader. Something he could not have done in season 1. Daryl would be a lot higher on the list, but throughout season 9, a bit like with Gabriel, he was doing stuff that simply didn't fit his character, and it just felt out of character. But I'm definitely for the Daryl hype, because he's a character with flaws, and a past that he has come back from. The character has changed positively this much since season 1, and is now much stronger for it. That makes him a great character. And now that he's taken the Rick leadership role, he's doing it in a very Daryl way. He's not doing it like Rick, he's not copying all of Rick's lines from the comics, he's replying as though Daryl would. It was very cleverly done when Daryl met Lydia. He managed to relate to Lydia, leading to him taking care of her. As much as I do feel Daryl did stuff that was out of character in season 9, we got to see him act as the leader, however still have his lone wolf outcast aspect, and it really worked. A leader when you need him, but when he's gone, you know he's going to be alone because unfortunately the experiences he's had. In season 2 when Carol loses Sophia, that's when we first start to see who Daryl can be because of how he feels about it. We see what lengths Daryl goes to go and find Sophia for Carol. And when it was revealed Sophia had died, Daryl was comforting Carol, and we see him repeat this in season 9 when she loses yet another child. Daryl will always be a really good character because as much as he's changed, he still looks after the people he used to, and he will always feel the same about certain things. Daryl is a legend of The Walking Dead. Number 4. Clementine. I probably don't have to say much for you to understand how good this character is. Clementine is the only character in the Walking Dead universes where we see her whole life over the span of the franchise she is in. We see her as a small girl and we see who teaches her all her stuff. We then see her in season 2 using all she's learned to go and be out in the world by herself. We then see her in season 3 having a much smaller part in the game, however the main base to the game is Clementine finding AJ, and then in the final season her story ends with a happy ending. She makes it to the end, she makes it to a happy place she can spend the rest of her life, and we see that all the characters we've lost over the span of these 4 games didn't die in vain because Clementine Clementine and AJ made it to the end. Clementine herself is a really good character because everything she is what she learned from the characters that have died. Her hair, her hat, how to shoot is from Lee. Everything Clementine does in combat is what she learned from Lee. Certain choices that she can make across the game is because of Kenny. And of course, since season 2, the main objective for Clementine is to do what Lee did with AJ and bring her up, but obviously be there to tell the story. So Clementine's story is full, and that's why she's such a good character, because she made it. She's one of very few characters that learn so much from the other characters who have fallen and make it so the characters don't die in vain. Now the thing with Clementine is the type of person she is determined by who is playing her. You can choose to be a disloyal Clementine, an angry Clementine, a good Clementine. What happens to her in the story is completely up to you. And because of how her story can kind of weed in and out of what is good or bad, deep down Clementine shouldn't really be in the top 3 because we're kind of forced to like her because of the characters we like other than her in the game who looked after Clementine. And as much as I love Clementine, she doesn't really have much personality. I think for me mainly she's just a symbol of the main characters we've lost in the game, which brings us on to number 3. Number 3. Kenny. Kenny is by far my favourite character in the Walking Dead game. Kenny lost his wife and son but proceeded to help the group. Kenny's character is all about loyalty. When playing as Lee in season 1, if you are loyal to Kenny, if you stand by him, he will absolutely do the same for Lee. However, if you stand against Kenny, if you go on the opposite side to him, he will take that to heart, and rightfully so. He will be upset at any choices against him. The best thing about Kenny is he doesn't give up. After losing his wife and son, he may have wanted to kill himself, but he never did it. He used all that power, all that frustration and anger on helping the group. If you're like me and throughout the seasons when you were playing you managed to keep Kenny alive to the point as much as you could, then you would know Kenny's latest ending is almost sacrificing himself for Clementine and AJ. Clementine, AJ and Kenny get into a car wreck. Kenny flies out the window and he loses feeling in his legs, and instead of getting Clementine to drag him, he tells them to go. Kenny distracts the walkers, leaving Clementine and AJ time to run away. As heartbreaking as his ending is, it's actually really fitting to Kenny. Kenny is like a reckless version of Lee, which brings us on to number 2. Number 2. Lee. Lee's story is possibly the most shortest lived one, yet the most powerful. The first ever scene we see in the Walking Dead game is Lee in handcuffs. A prisoner, he had just killed someone. Yet he ends the game in handcuffs, having been bitten, and having saved this girl and taught her so much to go on and live her life with. Having killed a man out of anger before the game even started, Lee's whole underlying story in season 1 is completely redeeming himself and making sure this girl lives. Like Lee in season 1, his whole story from the moment it was in the game to the moment he died was living for Clementine. It's the most amazing story of redemption that I've ever seen. Although Lee died, his whole sacrifice, what he lived for throughout the game, led to Clementine turning into a fighter and getting to a final destination in life to be happy. Lee taught Clementine everything she knows. The story of Lee is simply a man who tries to be the best version of himself. And throughout the game, certain characters try to corrupt Lee. They try to make him think he's a bad man, that he's a violent killer. But of course, what Clementine turned out to be proves otherwise. Lee died for Clementine. He died looking after Clementine. He is a legend in the Walking Dead universes. Number 1.
I'm gonna kill you. What? I didn't quite catch that. You're gonna have to speak up. Not today. Not tomorrow. But I'm gonna kill him.
Rick Grimes is the best character in The Walking Dead. Rick Grimes in the comics is good, but Rick Grimes in the TV show is exceptional. In season 1 and 2, I wasn't keen on Rick. I didn't really like that type of character. But in season 3, Rick started to lose something: his family. His family is the whole point of the character. Since the beginning of the show, that's what he's lived for. Not just blood-related family, but the people who he's met, who he's made family. And it actually breaks him when this is threatened. And we see a man just turn into a complete animal, a complete beast, when what he's been fighting for is threatened. And he will sacrifice everything. As we saw in season 9, he did. His final words before blowing the bridge up was, "I found them." The 3 words, of course, associating with the fact that that's his whole aim of the show. He found his family, he lost them, he's found new family, but now he's not willing to lose them again. Just like with all these characters on the list, I mean with most characters in the show, Rick Grimes on the TV show would not be the same without the actor playing him, Andrew Lincoln. He brings something so different to the character that makes him completely different to the one in the comics. I know a lot of people hated Scott Gimple writing the show at some points. I mean, I know I did for season 8, I do think it was done terribly. Of course, not just Carl Grimes' really, really bad death, the worst timing I've ever seen in any show, but I think All Out War was just done really terribly. I didn't really mind season 7, but season 8 was just so bad. But what we all need to give Scott Gimple credit for is Rick Grimes in season 7 episode 1, and of course most of season 6. Season 7 episode 1 is my favourite episode of all time, because we get to see the best and true soul side of Rick. We've never seen Rick this broken before. It was almost beyond shock. He was just so broke and destroyed because of this. And as much as it would be nice to have Glenn and Abraham in the seasons now, they didn't just die for the future character story arcs, but they died for a near perfect episode. I really feel like Scott Gimple, not just in this episode, but Scott Gimple brings out the best in Rick Grimes. It sounds bad to say, but when Rick is cocky, when he is overconfident and happy with life, it seems he's getting his season 2 self back again, and that's when I just didn't like him. So I really didn't like him much in season 9, and when he left, I could just tell the movies that Rick is getting is going to be best at bringing Rick Grimes' character back out again, because of course he's going to be looking for his family again, and that's when he was best. The greatest thing about Rick is when he's sad, he's almost dangerously close to just losing his humanity completely, but always coming back from it, only to have it taken away from him. And so the saddest and darkest part of Rick's story is that it's inevitably going to end in quite a sad way. Rick Grimes is the best character in both the Walking Dead universes because everything he does is in character, and he's had so much development, and he's become something so great since the first season, and he is bound to have a fitting end. It's a shame that Andrew Lincoln wanted to leave the show, but whatever happens, I do think he will return, because of course he opened the show, he will have to close it. It would have been really, really nice to see his reaction to the Pikes, but I think we're getting all this time away from Rick, and it's all going to be paid off in the movies. Like, in the movies, we're going to see Rick like we've never seen him, and I think we should really, really look forward to it. So that was my top 10 The Walking Dead characters. What did you think about my list? Do you agree with my list? Are you annoyed that I didn't put a certain character at a certain place on the list? Or did I miss out a lot of good characters? Now, I honestly saved quite a few characters for my top 10 worst The Walking Dead characters list. That's a video that I'm going to start making as soon as I've finished this one up. And I feel like that's going to be a lot easier to do because I'm just going to be talking shit about it. I'm pretty sure I was going to put Negan at number 10 on this list, but how he was for the whole of season 9, I think he's going to be number 10 on the worst characters because I really don't like that character now. Anyway, let me know your top 10 The Walking Dead characters list. I'm going to make sure to read all the comments because I'm really interested to see what other characters people have mentioned that I haven't. I saw some people mentioning T-Dog, which I did like the character, but I do think his end wasn't really fitting. It kind of happened out of nowhere. People also mentioned Comic Andrea, which I guess, yeah, it's a good character, but I wouldn't put it on the best character list. If you're interested in some videos about Rick Grimes and how his story could end, then some videos are going to pop up in about 10 seconds. They're going to be some theory videos about Rick, where he could have gone and where he's going to end up by the end of the show. Of course, remember to like the video if you enjoyed it. It really genuinely helps the video. It really helps support the channel. And if you would like to support me in a more personal way, I will leave a link to my Patreon on the eye icon on the top right of your screen and in the link in the description, where you can support me and actually get some good stuff for yourself too. Make sure to subscribe so that you are the first to hear about The Walking Dead, my top 10 Worst Characters video is going to be out soon, so look out for that. Thanks for watching.